This is Adeea with the Unbecoming Conversations podcast. Unbecoming Conversations is a self-development podcast where we talk about overcoming transition and change and challenges in order to create a life that we love. We have conversations about overcoming and unbecoming the things that we should be, all of those shoulds that society and other people, even ourselves, tell us that we should do in order to become what we are meant to be. Y'all, I am so excited about today's conversation. I just had to get up here and let you know it's a little bit of a long one, but you are going to get so inspired. You're going to laugh. You're going to get so many nuggets out of today's conversation. I'm talking with one of my dearest friends, someone that I work with in his group, Tarell Martin and C2 Mass Choir. It's a little bit different for me doing a video podcast as well. And it's so much fun. We have a great conversation. You hear his story, his testimonies, how God has grown him up and matured him, and how that shows up and how he shows up as a result of that in his life. I don't want to prolong this any longer than necessary. Like I said, it is a little bit of a long one. So if you're exercising, set that treadmill to about 60 minutes. If you're taking a walk, make sure you're going to walk for about 60 minutes. Grab a snack, grab some water, grab something to drink. You're not going to want to miss one moment of my conversation with my dear friend and the creator of Tarell Martin and C2 Mass Choir, Pastor Tarell Martin. Today's episode of the Unbecoming Conversations podcast is brought to you by Tarell Martin and the C2 Mass Choir and their latest single, Shine on Me, which you hear playing in the background. If you know me, you know I love good music and great singing, and you will absolutely get both in this reimagined throwback. If this song sounds familiar, it was first written and recorded by Andre Crouch. It was made even more popular by Vanessa Bell Armstrong and was the opening song for the hit show Amen. My friend Pastor Tarell Martin recorded this song with the C2 Mass Choir with help from the amazing lead vocalist Sarah Mabry and y'all. It is banging. The C2 Mass Choir is a professional community-based choir that is the reimagined extension of the award-winning Colorado Mass Choir from back in the day. For the past year, I have had the awesome privilege of working behind the scenes with Pastor Tarell and C2. They have an amazing group of talented, anointed singers whose purpose is to use their gifts to provide inspiration to all of us who need it. And Lord knows we need it, don't we? You absolutely have to go to your favorite streaming platform and follow Tarell Martin and C2 Mass Choir and download both of our singles, our first one, So Amazing, and our latest, Shine on Me. Hey everyone, and welcome back to this episode of the Unbecoming Conversations podcast. I am your host, Adeea Rogers. This is something a little bit different. I typically don't do video a whole lot, but I have an extremely special guest today, so video was absolutely necessary. Y'all, this is one of a handful of conversations that I really cannot wait for you to hear because it's with one of my favorite people of all times. We're going to have a great conversation. You're going to ear hustle a little bit on how our friendship works and the amazing things that he has going on in his life and just get a sneak peek behind the awesome person that I get the privilege to do life with on a daily basis. So I'm going to introduce to you all Pastor Tarell Martin. So I'm going to read the first paragraph of his bio, and then I'm going to let him take it from there by telling us a little bit more about his background. Because I think this is so true based on what I know about him. If ever there was a person who embodied music is in his blood, it's musician and producer Tarell Martin. Tarell's musical journey began at the tender age of 3 years old when he sat down at his first drum set. So then that's where I want you to pick up from. Decades of practice, dedication, and favor has given the world a musical creative noted for his smooth and banging beats on the drums and in the studio. So y'all, some of you know him, but I am introducing to some and presenting to others my friend Tarell Martin. Hey! So excited about this conversation. It's going to be so awesome. So as I said, I want you to pick up from the tender age of 3, you're sitting down at the drums for the first time. Tell us about yourself, your background, how you grew up, where you grew up. Tell us all the things.
For sure, man. First of all, it's just an honor to be on this show, man. This is great. Thank you so much for this great opportunity to be a part of your vision and your ministry. Man, I don't take that for granted at all. You could have chosen anybody else, so thank you for choosing me. Thank you, Lord. Um, but yeah, so growing up, it was 5 boys, 1 girl. My sister's the youngest. All of us is into music. Both of my parents are into music. Mother sung, wrote plays, all that stuff, and directed choirs. And so did my dad. Do the same thing. He played drums, piano. My mom played piano, and so all of that kind of came down to us. And so me and my older brother, and actually all of us played drums in some type of way. But me and my older brother, we were kind of Jason. We kind of took it more professionally, if you will. I started playing drums, learned after my dad, who was a beast on drums in his day, and I started playing at 3. I mean, I pretty much started, knew, God sometimes blesses some of us with gifts, and you just already know when you're a baby what it is, or it's just implanted in you. So that was one thing. Music was just in all of us since before we was born, I'm sure. And so I started doing drums, and but I was too little. I'm really tall right now, but back then I was too little.
Yeah, absolutely.
Little.
You are a giant in the eyes of God. Absolutely.
Right. But doing the being I couldn't really reach the pedals and stuff. So my dad was like, "Well, whenever you get older, we'll let you start playing at services." So I never played at services. I would just sit behind my brother and my dad and whoever I could get behind and just watch them and play in the air like a little kid, And but when my dad went to the church to study for his messages every week, I would go with him so I could practice by myself. Um, and that just ran into, and they finally let me start playing. And I remember I started touring at the age of 11, and my mom would come with me at a church that we was a part of, our Bishop Hamilton down in Monterey, California, and we did an East Coast tour, and it was lots of fun. That was my first time, and to go to New York on your first tour at such a young age was very weird, but it was cool. It actually prepared me, and I didn't know at the time because I was so young, for what I was actually going to do, which is what I do now, which is tour with artists, any genre, and I'm able to see the world, and some of it's very crazy, but it prepared me for that lifestyle, So, yeah, that's basically how I grew up, just all
Wow.
music.
So touring since 11.
Yes.
That is bananas. So that's what kicked off your professional career, like that tour. How did it because the names of the people that you've worked with, played for, toured with is literally like Stellar's Grammy who's who list of musicians that people know and love. So how did it kind of just develop from there? Was it just opportunities, or you're saying yes when you were afraid? Like, what did that look like for you after age 11?
So there's like 2 stages to this. I was actually just talking about this with a friend this morning. Um, the first part was, me growing up and playing, it was all gospel music, but I never felt really fulfilled. I didn't know what it was. And to be honest with you, I was a basketball player too. Um,
I
and
did hear that. I did hear you are also an athlete as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so there came a time, and we was all city, all state, and national. So it was. I felt like I was actually pretty good at basketball. Like I really wanted to make that my thing, but it came to a point to where God said, "All right, you have to choose one. one of these you're gonna have to put all your time in, and the other one just has to be kind of like a hobby type, whatever you like to do from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I'm sure I chose the right what God wanted me to choose, which was being a musician. Um, and put the basketball on the back burner. Sometimes I miss it, but I do know that I made the right choice. Um, but that the first part of it was when I made that decision. I remember sitting in our living room. My mom and my twin brother Timothy was a part of Colorado Mass Choir, and they did a concert with Fred Hammond, and which was at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, which was the first televised gospel concert, especially and I think the first gospel concert at MGM like that, and it was major, and it came on TV. So there was two concerts that came on at the same time. It was that one, and then Kirk Franklin. He did a huge first gospel artist to sell out a stadium, and I think he did it in Baltimore, one in C, and back in those days, and it was sold out. And it was dopest concert, but both concerts came on at the same time, and we were all in the living room watching this recording. I'll never forget this, and when it came on, that's when I heard God speak to me and was like, "That's you. That's gonna be you." And I was watching both concerts, and I didn't go to use the bathroom or nothing. I was like,
No
I stayed
snacks, even.
nothing. I stayed glued on the whole show, on the drummer. Every time they showed him, I mean, I was on it. And I never forget that night. That night while I was watching, I prayed to God. And my grandfather was pastor, my dad's pastor, everybody's in my family pastors, right? And my grandfather would always say, whenever you pray, be very specific with what you want from God, because you just might get it, right? And so I was very specific. I said, all right, God, this is what I want, right? And I want to be touring. I want to be playing in stadiums. I want to be playing for major artists and all that stuff. But what I did is from that night on, most of us will pray for something, but we don't put action behind it. Um, and I always felt like God could never take you where your character can't keep you. I always knew that I had to make sure that I knew the part in order to even expect God from me to even take me to that level. And so what I started doing from that day on is I said, since I'm not working because I was young, I was in school, then like a regular job, I'm going to practice. Since I want this to be my regular job, that's how I'm going to see it right now. So for 8 hours a day after school, I practiced. And all I did was either watch videos of famous drummers, watch how they move, watch how they interact, watch how they play, watch how they approach, watch their interaction with the artists, everything. And I would just practice for 8 hours a day. And that very same day is crazy. That very same day, a year after that, is when I got called to do my first tour. And I've been touring ever since that day till now.
Sir, I had no idea that was going to be your answer. Okay. Like, I feel like I know part of your story, but that right there, first of all, there's a lot to unpack there. So I have to take a detour. The fact that you just had that assurance that this is what you were supposed to do and you were going to take it seriously. Like, I think a lot of us maybe have the first part, like we may have an idea or an inkling or know what God is calling us to do, but how seriously do we take it? Do we actually put in that work of before it manifests itself, before you get the book, the first tour? Are you behaving like you are getting ready to go on tour? So that's what you did for a solid year. And then how many of us would have given up like 6 months in, man? So and so hasn't called me, or this record company hasn't called me. Like, I'm going back to doing what I was doing, or to, not doing it half-heartedly. But you stayed true to what you felt like God told you to do, and it paid off. Like, that is just that's crazy to me. Well, it's not crazy because that's how God works, but that's amazing.
Yeah, and you know, I thank God for how I thought back in those days, because as we get older, we know a little bit more. We act more like humans, which is when we're on a journey. Our mind is set on the destination, and it's so funny because back then I didn't care about a destination. I
You were just
cared,
doing what you love.
yeah, I cared about the journey. It's
Yeah.
funny. It's kind of like a car.
Mm,
Like the car just drives. It doesn't know that, oh, well, the end is about to come, or our destination is
sure.
on its way in
Right.
5 miles. It doesn't know that. It just
Right.
drives. That's it.
Right.
And wherever you, who's the controller of the car, wherever
Hmm.
you stop and wherever you say the journey is, that's just where it is. And so I looked at God as that. You know, I was the car, and
Hmm.
at the time I was just like, you know what, God, you showed me what it is, so all I'm gonna do is trust and walk by faith. But I don't care about what the destination is. A lot of times we ask God for, and it's all we care about is just the destination, and that's all we're looking at. So when it doesn't come in a certain time, we get discouraged and like it's not gonna ever happen. But God's like, don't worry about the destination. If I told you that's what's gonna be, and that's where you're gonna be at, or whatever it is, then that's what's gonna happen. But don't you worry about that. You just be that car and just ride, just take the journey. And whenever it comes, it's just gonna be there. And you'll be ready for it. You know what I mean? And so that's where I was. So that's
Hmm.
the first part of it. The second part that I was talking about is what I was talking about this morning. Like as a young person, it was weird how God kind of made me, because I was always about relationships, and I didn't really realize what I was doing at the time. But growing up, I wasn't really a talker, and I'm kind of that way now. Like if you first meet me, you probably won't get 2 words out of me unless you talk to me. You know, then and I'll be, I'll talk or whatever. But other than that, I'm very just observant or whatever, because I'm all about learning people. And at a young age, like I never forget, I was like the only kid with business cards, and I made my own on my mom's computer. And because it was just in me that said, like everybody around me will always say, I want to make all this money, and so I want this gig and this gig and this tour, because it pays this much money. And I was like, cool, well, I don't want that. And I don't know why I never wanted that, but I never ever desired that. I said, I want to develop relationships with the people who are paying us. Because if I can get in good with them, then I'll have money for the rest of my life. And that's what I was doing. And so people was like, why are you doing this stuff for so cheap? Or why are you doing this stuff for free? And I never told them why, because I didn't want to feel like that outcast person and people looking at me like I'm stupid. I didn't know. But I knew that all I cared about was developing relationships with them so that they could hire me for life, not just for one day. Because we know money doesn't really have a value to it. It's like once it gets in our hands, we're spending it right away. So I didn't want money for just one show. And so I began to start developing relationships with all the promoters, all the owners, all the management, all that stuff. And, and as my life went on, and I never forget, I had an interview with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Not an interview, but a meeting, and we went out to eat. And even those guys was like, man, if we knew what you knew now, we would be way further than we are. And I think they're like the gods of,
Yeah.
music.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I didn't know back then that was going to be valued like that.
Hmm.
But that's what I always did, and that's what I do now. And is really hone in on creating relationships with people, because that's what lasts.
Yeah. Wow. Again, so much to unpack. So I feel like even the second part of your story ties into the first. When you're developing these relationships, you're not concerned about what the end is. You're concerned about the journey of getting to know them, the journey of working with them, whatever that looks like, however that is. You're more tied to and invested in that than just, oh, this person could give me, $10,000 in a month, or this person could hire me for $1 million at some point. And I think that is what draws people and connects people to you, and where they in turn want to see you win and want to see you succeed. And they're like, let me circle back and see what he's doing now. Let me, promote what he has going on now, because whether I had or didn't have. Like, he was just about me and our connection and building that. And I think that's where a lot of people could thrive more and achieve more in their own personal lives, is if they really look at their connections, not just for what they potentially could do for them at some point, but just also for the fact that, people need connection. People need, somebody that can pour into them, or they pour into you. And not being solely concerned about where that ends up, but also about just the sheer journey of getting there. And I will say that, like, even just the journey of getting to know you has been just so enjoyable and pleasurable. And I love conversations like this, because I get to know you, like, in a different way, or I get to know different parts of your story. And it just also helps me to understand, oh, that's why he does this. That's why that's why he says certain things, and that's why he wanted to do this. So in case you all don't know, also another part of our relationship is that we now work together. We have been working together for a little bit over a year. And what we're getting ready to talk about now, and that is his latest endeavor, Tarell Martin and C2 Mass Choir. So I will say, like, kind of as a segue from that, I'm sure people, because they have known you as a drummer, they know you from Page Six, especially locally. They know you in that regard. Did people kind of look at you strange or wonder what in the world, when you mentioned to them, or when you said that you're gonna, like, start Tarell Martin and C2 Mass Choir? I feel like that some people, when they don't kind of know your story and how God deals with you, they look at certain decisions as that came out of left field, or, where did that come from? And they might think of it as a pivot, but it doesn't really sound like a pivot, because first of all, you come from a musical family, in a gospel musical family. And from what I understand, from Timothy as well as you, like, y'all had choirs and groups, like, throughout your young and adult life. So tell me about just the journey, or the process, or the conversations that you had when you were considering starting Tarell Martin and C2 Mass Choir, and then tell us what C2 Mass Choir is. Shout out to all my C2 fam that's listening.
Great people, great people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, like you said, just always being in the church and then making that transition out of the church into secular world. That's a story in itself. But I remember at a certain point, I wasn't satisfied. That was at the point to where I knew that what I assumed that this was going to be what I was going to be doing, that's when I knew that God had something else for me. I just couldn't see it or understand it until I got to a certain point. And I thank God for his patience with us, with me, to allow me to still do what I do and live to see what it was actually supposed to be. And but I still couldn't understand what it was. Like, it was like I was doing all this stuff, and I would have moments where I would feel like, oh man, this feels good. But for the majority, it was like the very next day, I was like, this is whack. It was like, I mean, and that's how it was, and I would like stop what I was doing and then get back into it and then stop what I was doing. And I know my managers and everybody around me was just kind of really mad at me because, I guess there's a famous word out there that people say I'm a mystery. And I'm really not a mystery. I just really am into myself a lot, like spiritually. And if something don't feel good and I don't know, I won't speak on it and I won't move until I know. And that's just where I was for a while. And I remember God gave me a vision to start a choir, and start Colorado Mass over again. And but I just left it at that. I didn't tell me to move or nothing. He just said, "This is what you're gonna do." That was it. And I'm one that really listens. When people talk to me, I'm a good listener. So I listen to every single word you say because every word means something. and I don't want to take my own meaning out of it. So when he didn't say a date, I didn't put a date in there. I just was like, okay, I see. This is what eventually I'm going to do. And I was into it because, like I said, my mom and my twin brother was a part of Color of the Mask, so I went to all the rehearsals, a lot of their shows and stuff, and I would always sit just wishing that I was a part of that. And never, but I was wishing that I was the drummer for them, honestly, and the music director. I never ever thought that this would happen. So that's all I wanted was that. And it's funny, how our great God sees us bigger than we see ourselves.
Listen.
But thank God I am open to really hear him, even in the places that I'm uncomfortable, and agree with it and do it and accept it, and so it wasn't until I the pandemic happened that that God started showing me more and more of it. And then right when it was over, he clearly said, "Now's the time." And that's really how I got into starting C2 Mass Choir. And I said I wanted to do something a little different, God, with it, give a different spin, different sound, because it's a different day. Music changes every day, daily, and that's when he was like, let's do C2 Mass Choir, And I said, yeah, I like that name. I like that name. Part 2, and so that's how C2 came along.
Yay! I love when you tell that story. All right, so maybe the part that you don't know about our starting to work together. So maybe, I think it was pre-pandemic, because that time is so fuzzy in my mind. You did a Kirk Franklin tribute concert, and I attended.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
huh? That was fun, but I forgot about
that. Was so much. That was so much fun. But for me, what that did was I got to see your creative side. I mean, I knew that you were a skilled drummer. I've watched you play at church as well as with Page Six and things like that. So, I mean, your skill was never, like in question for me or anything like that. But I really got to see your creative side. And I was like, this is something really amazing. And I remember sitting there at one point thinking, man, this is something I would like to be a part of. Like, I wish I could have been in on the behind the scenes of this, because this is right up my alley. Like, I love this. I love creative people. I love the arts and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember sitting there in that show thinking that. And so then when you inboxed me one day and was like, hey, can I talk to you? I was like, sure. And so we got on the phone and you just started sharing your vision and what you felt like you were called to do. I was like, I'm going to be polite and listen, but it was an immediate yes for me. And I wanted to do this because I felt like I could contribute something and, just help fulfill your vision for C2. So yeah, it was almost, I've said yes before C2 even existed, like in my heart, because I just loved your creativity and I loved how you put that show together and just all of the different elements of it, as well as the skill of singing that was there, the quality of singing, the quality of ministry. And that absolutely translates into C2 and what we do and how we show up in the community. You've already kind of said this, but do you think C2 is another part of the fulfillment of your purpose?
Oh yeah, definitely know that. I know that this is what it was all for, for me, ministry, and music. What that I was born into, choir. It doesn't really happen anymore,
Right.
like it used to back in the day. And but this is who I am.
Okay.
And it's funny, it's always been who I am. I've never changed who I was. It was funny because me playing in the clubs and stuff, it was like every time somebody would talk to me at the club, they were always either, if there were church people, they knew the fruit, by the fruit. They knew it. They'd come up to me and be like, boy, that's just anointing. Like they knew, like
Right. Right.
they say you a minister or you're a pastor because just from the way you play, and I ain't even say nothing to them, you know. Or I had several situations where people got saved just off of me playing. Matter of fact, the owner of the club, Live at Jack's, back then it was called Jazz at Jack's. I did a gospel show at their venue, and the owner got saved at my show.
Wow. Wow.
So it was always this has always been me. You know, a lot of people don't recognize that, but I never changed myself. I never changed for anybody. I always knew that I belonged to God. I always claimed Him as my father, my spiritual father, and you know, and I'll never ever like shy away from God just for some status or people or whatever that is. You know, I'm a church boy and I'm a PK, and those of us that are PKs out there, man, it's stuck. It's in you for life. The good and the bad and the
absolutely
for life. So
absolutely, yeah. I definitely agree with that. And now it, you know, so many more things make sense now. Just this little bit of conversation with you, so much more of how the development, the start of C2, where we are even right now, just makes so much sense. As it relates to your own personal journey. And I'm just glad to be along for the ride, man. Like, I love it.
Wouldn't be without you, that's for
Oh
sure.
no. I'm just here putting a little gas in the tank so the car can keep moving. That's all I'm doing. The journey has been the C2 journey. The C2 part of this journey has been bananas, to kind of say the least. For a group to be in existence for just a little over a year, like a year and a month from our first concert. And I say our, I don't sing, because as my daddy could say, I can't carry a note sealed in the envelope. However, I do feel like I'm a part of, I know all the songs. I can sing right along with it. I promise you, I know it all. I wear the outfits as much as I can. Like, I'm a part of the crew. So, but I will say that this journey has just been amazing. And I think, too, that's a testament to it being the right season and time for this to happen for a multitude of reasons, right? Like, because I grew up on choirs, right? So I've always felt this little longing in this part of my soul, like, where are my choirs? Where, like, that's what I grew up on. And I love solo artists. I love small ensembles and praise and worship teams and all of that. But I missed the energy and the personality that I feel like only choirs can bring. And so when you said choir, like, first of all, you had me at choir. Okay. And but then, I mean, I grew up on Colorado Mass and sang a lot of the songs in my youth choir and stuff. And so just to also watch what we have been able to do and accomplish and build, because literally you talk about starting from the ground up. We've had to build every part of this organization, of this family. And so tell us, like, kind of from your perspective about the C2 journey, and let's talk about some of the music that we've released so far.
You know, to start out C2, I've been doing this for a while now, you know, starting groups, starting choirs, starting churches, starting, you know, helping build. And so starting this, one thing that I knew that I had to start with is a staff. I knew that nothing will ever have its foundation, which means it can't grow or sustain itself without a strong staff and strong vision with the staff. And so I started off with all you all, and when I knew that that was going to be what it needed to be, and the strong foundation that it needed to be in order to hold up this mansion, if you will. Um, that's when I started to bring in the singers. But without the staff, that's something, I don't really talk to a lot of leaders these days. But, in everything that we do, and God gives us, there's always a foundation. Just like a house, there's always that foundational structure that has to be built first in order for the house to stand. And I think that a lot of people do not recognize that. They just start their stuff and do it themselves and bring in whoever they want to bring in, and eventually bring in staff members once things go wrong. Once they can say that, because that's how I started everything that I was ever a part of, and none of it never lasted. And I was wondering why it never lasted. And I understood after years and years of failing, oh, I never really had a foundation for anything to stand on. So things always changed. Things wasn't consistent, all that stuff. And so if there's a word, if you are a person that's starting a group, a choir, a business, whatever it is, please take this advice from me. Start with a staff. Start with your foundation, because without that, you're not going to be able to stand at all. Trust. I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I know. So that foundation, like I said, is the most important part. Mm-hmm. After that, I called some singers that I had worked with, whether it's from other churches that I was with, or other groups that I was with, or other bands that I was with, and asked them. But I was very strategic with starting C2 Choir. And, a lot of people who have been in my shoes will understand what I'm saying. But I wanted to purposely make sure that I didn't call people that would down what I'm doing or down my spirit without even them knowing that they were doing it. Through the years, we meet people and we develop relationships with people, and we learn them. And some people, we learn that, oh man, they really are people who don't really agree with a lot of stuff, and aren't into every single thing that we all say. But then when they're into it, then it's all good. But other than that, and sometimes that discourages us, and people don't realize that. And so it was funny, because I said, this is something so big, and I never started anything like this. I said, this is something so big that I cannot ask not one person, even though I know they would say yes, I cannot ask one person to be a part of this. And I know they will have something negative to say that would discourage me, or a feeling, because we can feel these spirits. And so, because of that, there was really close people to me that I never, ever asked to be a part of it. There was all of my family. I think I only told my sister about it, friend. And I think she was the only one in my family that I told about it, because that was another thing. I didn't want anybody. I wanted people in there that believed in my spirit and not in just Tarell. And that was another thing. That was really big for me. That I really, God told me, this is your baby, so you have to protect it. So that may be things that might hurt your feelings that you can't do, or ask people and all that stuff to start this thing out. And so, you protect it, and you know who you need to talk to, you know who you don't need to talk to. And that didn't mean that these people weren't going to be a part of it. It was just that the way you start, I believe, is the way that you finish. And I didn't want to start with a whole bunch of negativity. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, it's really going to happen. Do you have the money to do it? Can you really do it? Oh, here you go doing something else. All that, all of that. Usually that stuff comes from the people's closest, your best friends, because they know everything that you've done.
Right.
And I wouldn't been able to fathom all that stuff. I know I wouldn't have lasted, because nobody's saying that to hurt your feelings, especially family, but they don't realize that it actually really kills you, dream, And so I didn't ask any of them, and I know they got really mad at me about that. But I needed to do what I needed to do in order to make sure that this thing came through. So I asked the people who I knew that believed in the Spirit of God that's in me, it worked. I was like, whoa, okay, God, I ain't never started a group like this before in my life, with the staff that was perfect, with the choir that was perfect, and it wasn't everything that I wanted, but you just started, so you got to develop all that other stuff. So I wasn't looking for it to sound like Ricky Dillard right away, or look like Apple, or Macintosh or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't looking for all that. I didn't, I knew that everything has to develop. We all, including myself, had to develop, because I never really started a choir by myself, and so that's basically how this whole empire kind of got started over again, I should say, and getting everybody involved. I was definitely strict though with who I wanted, especially band and stuff. God really showed me. He said, Tarell, the rise and the fall is with you. Exactly what he said. So we tend, especially as church people, tend to blame Satan for a lot of stuff that's our fault. We tend to blame God for a lot of stuff that's our fault. And it's not them at all, it's us. And God clearly said, don't be blaming any of us on that. The rise and the fall is going to be only because of you. So he said, get who will get the job done.
Wow.
I mean, he was clear. And so people have asked me, well, why don't you use these people to lead songs? Or why don't you use other people to play? Why don't you use other writers and blah, blah, blah? And it's mainly because if this fails, none of y'all have to answer for it. I do. So I have to get who I know will get this job done. No matter what it takes. No matter what it takes. So if I gotta pay these musicians, then I gotta pay these musicians. If I gotta pay this singer, then I gotta pay this singer. But that's what it's gonna take, because I want to show God that this means a lot to me. You know what I mean? This is very important. I may have went off on some other.
No. That's absolutely where I wanted you to go. And I was just sitting here thinking about what you were saying about kind of the foundation and the structure that you built, and how important that it is and it was. And I think that is so true. And I think too, a lot of our dreams either get derailed or delayed because, like you said, you put it in the hands of people that really aren't capable of helping to fulfill the vision. And it was so super wise and smart of you to insulate yourself, at least for a time being, with only people that were going to speak life, that were going to be can do, going to be like, we're going to figure this out, more problem solvers and problem bringers. And that's how I am as a leader too. Like, I'm like, if you bring me a problem, you need to bring me at least one solution. I need to know that you've at least thought about it, because people love to be like, here it is. Now what you gonna do? And they looking at you cross-eyed and like, expecting all of this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, if you knew this was a problem, what do you think we should do? What have you thought about it? And so I think that that's one way for anyone that's out there that's listening, that is dreaming, starting something new, wanting to start something, whatever the project is, whatever the widget is, whatever the whatchamacallit is, make sure you insulate yourself with and surround yourself only with people that are going to speak life, that are going to help you figure it out, that are going to help you solve the issues, challenges, obstacles, and problems. Because that's how, at least getting out. I mean, sometimes we don't even get out the gate because we have people literally be like, well, the saddle is too small for you. And, the horse, one leg is shorter than the other. Like, they just throwing all this stuff. You're like, I haven't even left the gate. What are you talking about? And so I think that was so wise of you, and also very self-aware too, right? Because we know ourselves. We know that the people that we love, they can really influence us in a way. And I get some of that is about protection and them not wanting to see us, stumble or not achieve what we want to achieve and be disappointed in those things. But we also know that will keep us from actually taking steps and leaps of faith. And I think that that's what God requires of anything that is part of his will for our lives, anything that is big for the kingdom. It takes a huge act and leap of faith. And this also made me think about when you were talking earlier about like growing up and just how you approached your craft and your creativity and your life as a musician. And it's like you had this almost childlike faith, right? And that's what, I was like, you should have childlike faith. But somewhere along the way, like that almost gets beaten out of us, or between trauma and life experiences, we stop doing that. We look at the facts and the black and white and the figures and all of that. And the faith part of it is almost but removed. But one of the things that I definitely admire about you, even, like in our meetings, you still have this amazing sense of faith and this amazing just basis of, yeah, we can figure this out. It may not look exactly what we think it's going to look like right now. And literally, I have watched time and time again us figure it out, and us get what we need, and us get where we're going, and us just have this amazing experience in this choir, in this organization. And I'm grateful because it has increased my own personal faith, watching us build and grow and do and be and exist and grow, as being a part of the staff of this choir. Like, it has been just such a joy and a pleasure, being a part of C2 in this regard. So thank you for even thinking of me like that. Like, I know that you saw me like that. So I'm extremely appreciative, of just the chance and the opportunity to work with you. So
same here. Same. It's a joy.
I know, isn't it? It's so much fun. And I think people like y'all, I mean, and for the C2 fam that's listening, like, our meetings are mad fun. Like, we laugh and joke and kid. We're getting work done, but it is, I think that's where the old folks used to say there's a joy in serving the Lord. There's a joy that comes with, even when you have to talk about hard things or challenging things or trying to figure stuff out. There is just a joy there that we have, which makes all of the work, all of the getting quotes and trying to come up with policy and writing emails and doing contracts, it makes it all worth it.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that's too, like, when you are really walking in your purpose. And I do feel like my role in C2 is a fulfillment of my own personal purpose. And so when you're doing that, even the things that are considered drudgery or that we don't typically like to do, there's still like oh yeah, let me get this done. There's still a joy and a peace with it. And so this organization has been exactly what I needed at the time that I needed it. And I think I've said that to you personally, but definitely I wanted to say it publicly. Like, you have shown up for me in my life through this organization and just personally in a way that I knew that I needed, but I didn't know where it was going to come from. And I'm glad that it came in the way and in the time and in the just the fulfillment, the manifestation that it's come in through you and C2. Like, it has been exactly what I needed. You talked a little bit about the staff and the structure, and that's part of what you've done right. Is there anything else, like, the gigs, our structure, anything else that you feel like you've kind of done right? Because I know when you're starting out something, like, you just feel like, ugh, I need to do this right. And you don't know what that right is necessarily. But what else do you feel like you've done right with starting C2?
Another thing that we did, we had to think about, we had to think about our state. Everybody that starts something is going to be a little different because of where you are. Every city has a different culture, and so we're not really a musical state, especially in gospel music at all. And so I knew that we had to do something extravagant in order to start and have that same like power that Colorado Mass Choir had. And so our boy Greg Rideout has said, "Hey T, why don't we start out with doing the single?" So then people don't think that it's just this community choir that you trying to start back. That they know that we actually mean business. And so Greg wrote a song and called So Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent it to me, him and his brother. And I listened to it, and I was like, okay, let's put something down. Let's put something down. So me and my boy Anthony, we started kind of collaborating, figuring things out, and we came up with So Amazing. And so that was another big part of our foundation, you know, with starting something that would let Colorado know that it was serious, because, you know, gospel records really been done out here since Colorado Master at that level, period. And so this was going to be the first one. And I knew that the people in Colorado were like, okay, they do mean business. And so that was our first single, So Amazing. And we came out with that in our first release concert as well.
Shout out to Greg, because that's a great song, and I think it was a good song for us to kind of, you know, start out with and get our feet wet. And that's one of the things that you instill in us as a staff, but then also as the singers within the choir, is that we are professional artists, right? And that's what professional artists do, is release music. So it makes sense that we would do something like that. Now, I will have to say, this is the thing that I keep hearing people in Colorado say, because, you know, I'm from North Carolina. You say we're not really a musical state. However, every time I turn around, there is a musical. Okay. And we don't have that in North Carolina like that. I mean, every time. You can go to a musical almost every weekend somewhere in the greater Denver metro area or Colorado, between the Springs and that. And so, I mean, and honestly, and I know I've said this to Timothy, that the caliber of musicianship that's in Colorado is really untapped. The quality of singers, the quality of musicians there. I mean, because I've grown up in church, so I've heard a lot. And, you know, people consider the East Coast kind of like a mecca, so to speak, for some of that, especially the Southeast United States. But when I moved to Denver, I was like, where y'all been? Like, literally, for real. I've always felt that way. And so anyone that is listening, like, come to Colorado, please. There is so much anointing and talent there. I promise you, like, you will not be disappointed. And the thing too that I like about you and other musicians that I know and creatives that I know in Colorado is you're not afraid to kind of get out there and make a name and a way for yourself, right? Like, you are true musicians in that regard to me, and true creatives in that way. Like, you're not over on this side of the world. A lot of people want the record deal. They want to be, you know, they want to go that traditional route. But one of the amazing things that I've admired and taken a lot of just notes from, you know, being a part of C2 and just watching other people that I know in the area, is that you're not afraid to take your career in your own hands and put it out there for people to, you know, either embrace or not. But you're being true to who you are as a creative, as a musician. Oh, you know what we didn't talk about?
What's that?
Shine on Me.
Oh yeah, one of the favorites.
Absolutely. So give us a background.
Yeah, so Shine On Me is our single that's out right now on all platforms. Great song by Andre Crouch. Growing up in California with my uncle, John Nash Jr., he taught his group this song, and they sung it all the time and killed it. That was one of my favorite songs to hear them sing. So they just stuck with me all these years, and I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and do that song as a single, you know, re-release it, and add a little spin on it. And so that's kind of like where the vision came from. And so, and you know, Vanessa Bell Armstrong performed it, and we got my friend, my sister,
Sarah
Avery, to lead on it, which happens to be one of Vanessa Bell Armstrong's background singers. Actually, she did it with her a lot.
Sarah sings the mess out of that song too. She sings the stew out of it.
It's such a nice woman. Her husband is
She's amazing.
amazing too. He's a musician too. And the whole family, they're just a great group of people. You know, you don't really find people like that. Just good and clean. good to
Right.
clean. But
Yeah.
she killed it, and I hope that you guys really enjoy it. Did it, arranged it with my boy Joe Johnson third, for New Orleans, and great producer, great songwriter, and C2 killing it. So y'all go
Yeah.
pick it up everywhere.
Absolutely. We have 2 singles out and the third one that's on the way. So on all the platforms, both singles are out, right? So Amazing and Shine on Me. Save it to your playlist. Make sure that you are pumping it, share it with your friends. It is a great sort of throwback moment to the opening of the show, Amen.
Yes.
I mean, if you watch that show, then you will know the song and you will rock, clap, and sing your little heart out with the
Right.
with the C2 twist, though. And that's what I love about C2. Everything is with a little twist, a little, as they call it now, razzle dazzle.
Exactly. Exactly.
A little sass, a little sauce on it. I love it. A little sauce. I love creatives. I love musicians. I love anybody that's in the arts and things like that. And I love like delving into their minds. So I got to peek behind the curtain a little bit with you. I'm very interested in knowing like what is your creative process? I think I've always wanted to ask you this question. Like, how do you study for shows? How do you choose the music for C2? How do you come up with the shows that we have right now? Because like, okay, y'all, if y'all have not heard C2 Hez Medley, I promise you. And if you haven't heard the new Colorado Mass Medley, oh my God. So okay, I'm gonna be quiet because I need to know all the things. Peel back. I need to know how your mind works when you're in that creative mode like that.
Man, so being creative, takes great inspiration. Daily I'm listening to music, and I'm constantly listening to different artists. So, my favorites: Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and Fire, Gap Band, Prince is my number one. MJ, Kurt Franklin, Fred, Thompson Community Choir, Orlando Draper and the Associates. Ricky Dillard.
Some of the young bucks are gonna have. They're like on Google right now. They're like this.
Uncle John, Bounty Key, Hezekiah Walker. I mean, I can go on to, being from the West Coast, listening to Snoop and Dre and Dog Pound and, Ice Cube. And I mean, it's kind of like I listen to so much music, so many different music that just develop this inspiration and this creativity. I mean, and usually when I hear something, it just, I don't know, something just happens in my head where I'm like, oh man, we can put that here, we can do that here, we can do this, or I'm just sleeping, just God gives me something, a melody, and I wake up and I pick up my phone and I just record it into my voice memo, and then I go back to sleep, and the next day I wake up and I wake up the guys and hey, let's record this. All right, let's see what we can add to this. This is the hook right here. Let's put it together, And so that's really how I create most of my stuff. Just putting all this music in my head and taking it in and feeling it. One thing that I'm about is feel, which, I want to feel the spirit of the song. And I'll record a song 25 times until I can feel it. Matter of fact, we're recording our next single right now. And one of the singers, my god sister Sonia, said, "I'm sick and tired of recording this song."
I know
And I
she
said,
said.
"We're going to continue to record it until I feel it. And if we don't feel it, then it's just going to be something else."
Right.
And so now I finally feel it.
Okay.
And I got it, but that's how, whenever I'm producing or whatever, I have to feel it. We can't just do all kinds of licks and all kinds of runs and riffs and harmonies. I need to feel that thing. Because when people are listening to it, they're going to feel the same spirit that was put into it, no matter whether they like it or not. You know what I mean? And so that's how we come up with the stuff we created. We'll come up with the hook or songs that, like, the medleys and stuff like that. I was like, what's the number one hits? Let's get those songs together, songs that everybody knows or songs that are easy. and let's make it more current in some way. Maybe that might need to change with the vocal arrangement, or maybe that might need to change with the musical arrangement, or maybe both, you know. But how can we make it a little bit more powerful, but still to where everybody can know that that was the song, you know, it's not so far out there.
And I always think about how things translate into other genres or industries. And I think that there is kind of like that feeling that you have when you know you're kind of in the right path, or you're there's a an author that calls it your zone of genius. And I feel like, you know, when, like you say, you do it until you feel it. You do what you have to do until you feel like you're in that zone of genius. And I think that's where the greatest creativity, the greatest works of impact come from. And you clearly are very, very good at that, because as long as I've heard heads, and I love heads, like love them. But that heads medley, it does something to me every time. I'm just like, I literally have to restrain myself from like jumping on stage and singing with y'all. Like literally. And like jumping in front of you because I love that Hez medley so much. And I love the Colorado Mass too. That's a little bit newer one, but that Hez has been in rotation for a minute. So I definitely know that one inside and out. So you've named a lot of artists. Who inspires you? Musically or otherwise, but definitely musically. Who inspires you?
You know, it's like every season of my life is somebody different.
I can understand that.
Prince definitely was probably my top. Prince and James Brown, because you know,
What about
because
James Brown inspires you? I'm very interested in that, because one of his saxophonists, Maceo, is from like 30 minutes away from from my hometown,
oh
Kansas.
wow,
Yeah,
that's
they
crazy.
have like a little park and everything for him. Yep.
Yeah, Maceo Park is
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, man, Prince, James Brown. Well, James Brown inspired Prince. So, but he's funky. He, you know, as a director, I look at him as a producer and director.
Okay.
He's able to feel all the instruments. He's able to play them all. But the way that a producer and a real director, actually plays is different than just somebody who plays that instrument. You know, and I love how he knew exactly what he wanted and knew how to execute that, how to talk about it, how to explain it, how to play it, all that stuff, and bring it all together. Like he heard the end and knew how to get there. Like James is just that. And so listening to him, listening to Prince and all them, that's what I gained from them is, okay, how does a real leader know the ending, but also know how to get there? A lot of people don't know how to do that. They'll just know the ending and be like, all right, let's all figure it out together, you know. But I'm not one of those guys. I want to know how I'm going to get there, and we're going to do it. You know what I'm saying? We're going to execute. And so you do this, you do that. Let's put the, well, no, that won't work. Let's do this, do that, boom, boom, boom. You know, and so, but James Brown and Prince and love Kirk Franklin, great inspiration. But in this season right now, probably my best inspiration is Anderson .Paak, who was like, I feel like we're like brothers in a way, because
I can
he's
see that.
singer, producer, drummer, and with everything that I've done. He grew up in the church, Pentecostal church. I grew up church. Like his whole story kind of matches mine. You know, it's weird. And so, but his creativity, golly, it's from his first album to his last album, it's nuts. Like he's probably the one that I would want to meet now and and chop it up. Like he's the greatest inspiration. Just seeing anything that he does makes me go into the studio and write something else. You know.
I love that. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. And it's almost like too, you like people that like they're musicians, right? Like I feel like there's some musicians are for the masses. It's for, the common folk like me. But I feel like there's some, and the ones that you named are definitely ones that I feel like other musicians would be like, oh my God, like, what are you doing? And trying to dissect that and figure out. And then the thing that I do like about you that I think is a little bit different, only because I know you, I feel like you turn that around. Is like, how does that work for me? Not trying to necessarily copy somebody else or, do that. You reimagine it in your own voice, in your own tone, with your own personality. And I feel like if people can do that with whatever, again, their widget is, this world would be like amazing, just in terms of the creativity, the impact that we have. And so I like the people that are inspiring you. That's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that. I can't remember which show we were still in, but it was like there were some people who was kind of interviewing, if you will, the band. And this was my first time being able to hear them talk about C2. I had never heard what they felt and what they feel about me, my leadership skills or whatever, or lack thereof. Never heard it. So, the drummer, my drummer that I love, my new brother, Devin Reed, he said, it's so easy to work with Tarell because he wants you to be yourself. And I had never heard that from a musician before in my life. And I've worked with so many, I'm a music director for so many. And so to hear it, I'm sure most people think that, but there was two people that spoke something in front of me that I could remember. I'm sure a lot more people said stuff, but that was something that I remember. And then my godbrother in Chicago, his name is Chris Misko. He's a great drummer. And he said, you are, and remember where I say he's from, Chicago.
Yeah.
He said, you are the best and the easiest choir director to follow. Those two things I always remember. Go down in history.
But that's totally.
And I'm not even a choir director. My brother and my boy Neil and all the they were born to be choir directors. I'm nowhere near a choir director and never will say that I am. I'm just a producer and I know how to put it all together, which is totally two different things, but I never say that. But when Devin said that, that's exactly who I am because, growing up in California, that's what we will always tell people. Like, if I wanted Dennis Chambers, then why would I want you to play what he's playing? Let's go get him because we can get him. He's available. Apparently, as long as he's alive, he's available. So that's what I think. If I want Kurt Franklin, I'll go get Kurt Franklin. Why do I want you to be him? You know what I mean? Or whatever, whoever it is. And so, I am myself and will always be myself. And I take these things from all these people, from all these artists, and I develop who I am. And that's what I want everybody else to do. That's why I don't want them to be mini Tarells or whatever like that. In a way, I want them to the strengths that apply to them from me or from things around me, people around me, and develop who they are. And that's why Devin was able to say, he wants you to be you. He'll tell you what to do, but with that, he wants you to be you, because that's who he called. It's you.
That is so profound. And I think that is so true. And for leaders, I think that's when you get the best out of your staff, right? Like when you get the best out of the people that you're leading is when you give them. And that's the thing about that I also admire and respect about you and like about you is the fact that you are always casting vision. You're always, kind of letting us know, some more than others, parts of the journey and where we're headed and doing things like that. But then you allow us to walk that out in our own way, in our own personality, however, God has wired and tempered us and made us to be. And I think that there is like a freedom and a liberty in that. And I think that's also where kind of the anointing comes in, because he's anointing who he made you to be, not a replica or a representative of you, but who he actually made you to be. And I think that's what makes it just so impactful. And that's what makes your drumming better. That's what makes your keyboard playing better. That's what makes your choir directing better. That's what makes your singing better, when you're under somebody that gives you the freedom and the flexibility to be who you actually are. So thank you on behalf of all of C2 and every musician that you've ever worked with, because we appreciate it. Absolutely appreciate it. So my podcast is called Unbecoming Conversations. And the whole premise of this podcast is the fact that I feel like that there are certain things that we have to unbecome, like the shoulds, the things that people thought say that we should do, should be, should behave like, should think, in order to become what we're actually meant to be. Were there any things that you had to overcome or unbecome throughout your life, but also especially in this C2 phase of your life, in order to really walk in this the way that you want to, in the way that God wants you to?
Yeah, it's cool that you asked that. There was a couple of things that came to mind when I'm thinking about this question. But I'm gonna say this one, because one has to deal with my spiritual walk, and the other one has to deal with my character. And the spiritual walk part of it is really important to me because that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I was, grew up Kojic and everything, and I remember our leader, minister of music, had got up and said something about me in front of the whole church. But didn't say my name, but was definitely, talking about me because I'm the only person that looks the way that I look that was at the church, earrings, blah, blah, blah. And I was the only musician in the whole state that was church of God in Christ and playing in the club. So, it was like everybody knew.
Process of elimination.
Exactly. Everybody knew. I mean, even the guys behind me, the musicians, they was like laughing because they knew it was like me, and it was funny, but it hurt me. And I remember I snuck out the back door of the church, and my mom and everybody was looking for me, but I just began to cry. I was so torn apart, and I remember that moment I told God, I said, "If you're mean like this, I don't want to have nothing to do with you, ever." I don't want no parts of you at all if you hurt people's feelings. And at that moment, that's when God showed me who He is. It was at that moment that I started studying for myself. The Bible, I don't even know why I was picking up the Bible, but God knew why I was. And He just placed that need in me, told me, guided my hands on which scriptures to go to, what to start reading, where to go, what chapters to go, what books to go to, all that stuff. And I started seeing God for myself, and I was like, wow. So I actually ended up getting more and more and more mad. And I was like, God, all this time.
Because you see the contradictions.
Yeah, this is a lie, and this was a lie. And,
yeah.
But then it was like God was raising something in me. It was like, I'm not telling you that to judge other people. I'm showing you what you need to know, because you needed to know that that was possible to happen. You needed to know that there was going to be false prophets, because I told you that in my word. You need to know that everybody around you that says, Lord, Lord, is not going to make it into the kingdom of heaven. And so you needed to see this for yourself, not for you to judge everybody every time you go to a church service and stuff, because everybody ain't bad. And all those people ain't bad either. But that was for you, so that you can learn, so that you can know. And so at that moment, man, I just got so deep in the word. My relationship with God just got so tight. I mean, so tight. And I knew Him. And because of that, I didn't leave Him. And because of that, He started showing me why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm gifted, why I'm a musician, why I love music, why I'm going to be this choir director, why I'm going to do all these things. You know what I'm saying? And now that you know why, now you can execute my will for your life. Now you can save the souls that are called to you. Now you can be more aware of where you are and what you are doing, because you know why you're doing it. You know what I'm saying? And you can be more powerful for the kingdom of heaven, And so that's basically my little You
You
almost have.
knew him, you got to know him, so you didn't leave him. If nobody gets anything else out of this interview, get to know him for yourself so that you will never leave him.
That's real.
I'm gonna have to sit with that for a minute. Like, yeah, we might have to end this interview early because I'm just like, OMG. But that is so true. And I think for people that have experienced church hurt and any other kind of hurt, like you have to get to know God for yourself, because also in getting to know him, you get to know yourself.
That's right.
And so all of the things, the maladies and the deficiencies and the insecurities that this hurt or other people have tried to put in you, it gets dealt with and it gets replaced by the truth of who he is and the truth of how he made you. And I think that that's what's so important in walking out this journey and doing what you're called to do, what God has called you to do, and in living like that life. That is probably one of the greatest lessons that I think we could ever learn.
That's right.
Wow. Do you want to talk about the other area in your life that you had to unbecome or overcome?
So yeah, it was a moment where I was actually in a shooting at this church. And long story short, I was outside at the church getting some air while service was going on, and a car came by, and a guy got in an accident, came out, and started shooting at us, and I was the first one out there, and God spared my life, and it was that moment where God started changing me, who I am, how I think, character in me. And I started to now see life as, and ask my question all the time, like, what really matters, you know, and something that we don't ever think about. We go through life and well, let me talk about myself. Like before then, I didn't care. Like I just went off on anybody who disrespected me. Um, I didn't care about relationships that much like that. I would just be like, bye. You know?
Too bad, so sad.
Right. So it was like at that point, God just changed my whole heart, and said, Tarell, what really matters? You had a clear glimpse of 1 second. You see somebody, and 1 second you're not there. And so what really matters? What really matters? I really want that to sink into people. What really matters? Is it that you're heard, or that you just touch somebody's heart and you show them love? Do you have to be right, or does it matter that what matters more? And so and so that was a big turnaround for me, and that in a lot of ways, people's like, Tarell, how do you still be friends with these people who jack you up, who screw you?
Because that's my question. Isn't it my question? Is that not my question? I'll be like, and we're still talking to them because why? Or why?
And people constantly dog me, and I never said that I was perfect. I'm always making mistakes, and I hate the mistakes that I make. I always say to myself, one mistake is too many, and I'm always doing that, but I'm always asking God to forgive me and stuff. So I never say that I'm perfect, but they just put you in this place, in this space where it's like you can't make any mistakes, and I always say to myself, you know what? So those people, they haven't probably had that experience that I've had, but what's most important is that they know that even in spite of what they do to me, that I still love them, just like in spite of what I do to God on a daily basis, which is horrible, that he still loves me.
Yeah.
And if my prayer every morning, which this is my prayer, is God, help me to be more like you every day. They gotta understand what that really means, because in church we pray the same prayers and we preach the same messages and we have these sayings that we say all the time, but we never ever live them. We never live them. You know, and up here like, man, do we understand what it means to love like God loves? Because just think about all the stuff you do to him daily. And ask him to forgive him, and then right after that, do the same thing in like 5 minutes because somebody else needs you mad. You know, and so I'm just looking at people just like, you know, if I hurt your feelings, I want to do like the Bible and let you know what, forgive me. None of that stuff matters. I want you to know that I love you. Like, it, forgive me. That I'll make sure that don't happen again. I'll try my best to be a better person, you know, because that's what matters to me more than for me to try to prove my point, you know. And so that was a big turnaround for me. You know, I'm always trying to hear people's heart first. I never was that way before. You know, I'm always wanting to hear their heart because sometimes our emotions talk for us, but don't know how to interpret anything that you're feeling, really, even though it's your emotions talking. And so because I have to realize that, especially as being a leader in choir, especially in most churches anyway, are filled with most women than men anyway. And so I have to get beyond that whole emotional side of me and be able to relate and say, okay, this is how you're seeing it. I feel you now. So what I have to say is not more important than who you are to me. And so I want you to know that I understand that, and I will make sure that I change myself so that you can be more comfortable with me, so that you can feel the love, and so that you can be needed. And I never ever took the time out to care about people ever in life. So, you know, that was something God used, that, you know, that shooting to really change me, to help develop me into a better person. And I'm still, you know, working on that daily, you know, but that's the reason why I still have people in my camp that doubt me. That's why I still have people in my camp that don't care too much. That's why I still call people and check up on them, and I know they can care less. They probably blocked my number, you know, for personal reasons, but that's the reason why, because I just love and I care. No situation will ever be magnified over God's love to people.
Wow. That is such a poignant story. And I remember the first time you told it to me, I was riveted. Because you look at people and how they show up, but you don't always know all of what happened in order for them to show up like that, right? You just think, oh, they had this wonderful, amazing, easy, carefree, so to speak, life or successful life. You don't realize that there are stories and challenges and things that potentially were very traumatic that helped shape who the person that you see in front of you now. And so I appreciate your being transparent with that, because I do see that that's also how you show up as a leader, right? Like, I see your care for people, and I've experienced your care for me, because God knows, I totally, totally get it. I totally get it. And I totally take, I'm a lot. And so you've been very patient and very like loving and, very caring and nurturing. And so I'm grateful that, God did that work in you, because it does help to show. And for me personally and particularly, like, I, in a time in a particular season when we first started working together, where I wasn't sure of God's love for me, like, you showed it to me. When I didn't see it from people that I thought I should have seen it from, you showed it to me, right? And so it reminded me, like, one of my favorite scriptures is a little part, and I think it's Psalms 8:4, and it's like, what is man that God is always mindful of them? And so, sometimes I'm like, well, my life isn't that bad, and so why would God care, to show up for me in this way? And he absolutely cared to show up for me in that way, with bringing you into my life in a way that I needed. That is probably one of the greatest gifts you have ever given to me personally, was your gift of friendship, your gift of just counsel. And you, one day I remember, I think you asked me how my day was going. I was like, not that great. And you said, well, you want to talk about it? And I was like, oh, okay. And I reluctantly shared. And I've never forgotten the story that you shared with me. And every time I feel that way, that I feel that kind of sense of overwhelm, like I remember that story. And that's been at least 6, 8 months ago. So to have people in your life, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to have conversations like that with people that are very important to me, is to, for people to see that there are people that care, that there are people that love and that nurture and that literally do life together, because we don't always see eye to eye, we don't always get along the greatest. I feel like, though, with you, I've learned to be able to communicate how I feel and what my thoughts are, and then to be able to move on from that and to not let it impact our friendship. Him and his brother, one thing you can't do is talk about neither one of them.
Oh man, that's
They
yeah.
have to talk me down off the ledge so much. They be like, you don't say nothing. Don't say nothing. That's why he's laughing, because he knows it's true. I think he had to tell me this week, don't say nothing. Just chill out. When we were at an event, he was like, I didn't even tell you this because I knew you were gonna go off. I was like, when did this happen? When?
That's true. That's so true.
But I'm loyal to my people like that. I am. Like, you can't. Mm-mm. Especially when my experience with them is different than you're trying to perpetuate. Like, no, like, then I didn't say they were perfect, but they're not like that. So you can't do that. All right. So my last question: what's next? How will you expand or continue in your career and calling? What's next for you? What's next for C2? Whatever you want to share is fine.
For sure. I think, we what's next for C2 is continue to grow in numbers, can grow together spiritually, and to continue to, develop vocally, um, in our sound, continue to do that. And I'm hoping to get with some good backing, some good, great record label, and just make this thing happen all over the world. Get the support, so that the main goal is to be able to share the gospel, which is the good news of Jesus Christ, all over the nation. And God is going to use us. Perfect. We want to be ready and prepared, so we never have to get ready. So, that's the goal. And I'm definitely, I'm another goal of mine is I'm working on a song right now that nobody really knows about, but working on a song right now that I'm going to have. We're going to do with an orchestra, and hopefully our Denver Symphony. And it's going to be something beautiful, something nice, and something that I just want to be able to touch God's people's hearts with, with what God's given me. So I'm working on that right now. So as well,
I love it.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, you're always busy. I love it. And your mind is always working. Like when we have meetings and stuff, I'm like, oh, what has he been thinking about today? And when you call me, I was like, oh yeah, he's been thinking.
And you know it every day, all day, all night.
I love it. Well, Tarell, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, because you're even out and about as we're doing this. So I really appreciate this. This has been amazing. So many nuggets. I can't wait to get back in and edit this and get it all together, because so many nuggets in here that I think will just be encouraging to people. No matter where they are in their journey, whether they're starting something, whether they're a part of something. Because I think, too, in addition to being good leaders and good starters of things, we also need to be good followers and good participants and good congregants. And so for me, this even helps me be that much more invested in my work with C2 and in your vision and fulfilling that. So I appreciate your transparency. I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing some challenging situations. And I think that it's really going to be helpful to a lot of people. And I'm excited for everyone to hear this. And I hope that they have been blessed by this interview, and that it will just encourage them to keep on, to find that thing that they can be a part of that is going to be something that they can enjoy, not just the destination, but the journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity, man.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for everyone that's listening, leave your comments. Go follow my friend. Go follow C2 Mass Choir. Again, all of that will be listed in the show notes, so you can follow us as we are traveling, because we're getting ready actually, when this comes out, we'll be on the road. We'll be there. We will be taping for Dr. Bobby Jones.
Bobby Jones.
Exactly. So exciting. Like, can you believe? And I feel like we may have thrown his name out here at some point when we were talking in the planning stages or in the early days of C2. To see a year and 2 months later that we will be gracing that stage. You can't tell me God is not faithful.
No.
Cannot tell me.
Accomplished a lot in such short time.
Such a short amount of time. Yeah, we didn't really go into that, but we've been to Missouri, we've been to Arizona, as well as all over, and including the rural parts of Colorado. Y'all went at the end of July, didn't you?
All over.
Yeah, so it's been an amazing journey, and it's just the beginning. That's the cool part. It is just the beginning. So, yep. Love you.
Love you. Thank you.
Take care.